Listen, the voice that says you should, rewiring your internal expectation. That's what we're talking about today. That guilt you feel, it isn't God, right? It's programming. All right. So this lesson targets your inner critic and it in the internalized roles that you have adopted. Okay. Listen, the fixer, the strong one, the peacemaker, you'll learn how to really challenge the guilt based self talk that really keeps you trapped in roles that no longer serve your becoming. So I'm going to say like this: the guilt you feel isn't always God, you guys. Sometimes it is truly programming, especially when you know you've come from backgrounds that were, more chaotic, probably more controlling, right? You come from these circumstances. Remember, your nervous system is there to really keep you safe. So a lot of what these life lessons are here to do is to really help you to unlearn, right, and relearn some things. All right. So the voice that says that you should rewiring these internalized expectations. Listen, you've been carrying roles that look like responsibility, but were really guilt in disguise. Listen, that should in your head, that pressure to always be available, always be strong, and always hold it together. It's not the Holy Spirit, you guys. It's programming. And today's life lesson really helps us to break this down. How internalized roles become your identity. Why guilt really intimidates or mimics expect obedience, right? So why does guilt really mimic obedience, and how to really rewire the voice that says you should into one that says you're free? All right. You don't have to keep performing for your worth. You don't have to hold it together, or you don't have to hold together what God never really asked you to carry. All right. You are allowed to rest, you're allowed to release, and you are allowed to be enough right here. So I want to say that again. You don't have to hold together what God never called you to carry. A lot of things that we're carrying, it wasn't God causing you to carry it or calling you to carry it. It probably was dynamics in the family. Right. It probably was a dynamic that you had to carry for your mother or your father or your siblings and things like that. And as you matured, right, and as you become an adult, you just assume now that this is your role. So let's be honest. What is one of those shoulds that's been running your life lately? Is it, I should be doing more? I should be strong for everyone. I should always say yes, right? I should have it all together by now. Now I want you to pause, and I want you to ask yourself, who gave me this script, right? Who gave me this script? Is it coming from my truth, right? Or is it just loud guilt? All right. So is it coming from my wounded me, or is it coming from the wisdom that I have been able to garnish as I've grown? All right. Listen, you don't have to obey pressure to prove your worth. You don't have to carry roles that you never chose. All right. You are allowed to let go of should and choose what's true for you right now. So I want you to drop one should, right, that you're releasing this week. All right. And let's rewrite the script. This is the last lesson for this week, and we know that this week we're talking about interrupting guilt and internalized expectations. And the whole idea was to really challenge the emotional habits rooted in guilt, people pleasing, and inherited pressure. All right. So this week is really about helping you stop managing everyone else's emotions, really stop being everyone's emotional bodyguard, right? So here is what I want to ask you. What if the voice that you've been obeying out of guilt isn't divine? It's just loud, right? And sometimes I'm saying the voice, but what if it's the emotions, right? So sometimes we don't hear the voices. Maybe we just feel the pressure, right? Maybe it's this intuitive nudge to do this thing, right? Maybe it's the habit of doing it, right? So maybe it's not a voice, maybe it's a feeling, maybe it's a nudge that you just have to be the savior. All right. Why am I doing this session? Because I've lived the identity of the strong one. I specifically target, right, my avatars around the strong one, right? And so I have been doing this work for years, right? And when I was the identified as the strong one, right, I really thought that was my calling. Like, okay, God sent me to my family to really help them, right? And I do feel like a part of this is true, but a lot of times it's not that we not called to spaces to really help them. It's that, am I doing this from my wise person, or am I doing it from my wound? And how I know the difference is because there's a sense of fulfillment. I can allow my yes to be yes, my no to be no, right? I don't have like this guilt about saying no, right? And remember, no can also be KNOW, really knowing your boundaries, knowing what you value, knowing your intent, right? Knowing what you were really called to do, or what part is for you and what part is not for you. So again, I've lived the identity of the strong one for years, really thinking it was my call. And I've worked with hundreds of people who live this identity and thinking it was their calling, but it was just guilt shaped like responsibility. And a lot of us are taking on responsibilities that's really more guilt, and we don't want to deal with the rejection, right? We don't want to deal with the backlash of a person feeling away because we are not doing what we typically would do. Listen, I want others to know this. Guilt isn't a character trait, it's a story, and you do have the power to rewrite it. And so we're going to try to do that today in today's life lesson. The disclaimer for today: this lesson isn't about demonizing a role, or demonizing you, or judging you, or even judging your family's needs or dynamics. It's really about recognizing where they came from, right? And if you're still serving, or if they're still serving you for who you are now. Again, I do feel like there's seasons, right? So the season of my life where I was the carer, right, for my family, I feel like that was a season, and it definitely helped me to be the woman that I am now. But is that my season now? And I think that a lot of us are stuck in seasons, right? So maybe when you were the older sibling, you had to, care for your older siblings, or maybe there was a season in your life where you had to hold it all together. But remember, first we make our habits, and then our habits make us. And so sometimes we're still living in the outdated season. All right. So again, this session is not to demonize these roles, right? It's just to recognize where they come from, and if they're still serving you for the person you are now, because transformation really happens when you come in alignment, when you choose alignment over obligation. All right. So, hello. Okay. Hello. Let's take our deep breath, right? This is your time, no pressure, just your presence. And I want to welcome you back to Life Lessons with Dr. Sheila Little. If you're new here, I'm Dr. Sheila Little, licensed master social worker. I've been a clinical therapist for 20 years. I am the creator of the Stop It Now method. All right. And I want to welcome you back to Life Lessons. Life Lessons is a part of Project Life. Project Life is where we turn theory into practice. So I want you to drop a word in the chat and describe how you've been feeling today. I know that I am getting this out a little later, and it's because, a lot of things have been moving in my life. So if I was to say, how am I feeling? I think that I'm feeling a little like recalibrating, right? Looking at the life lessons, making sure that I'm doing and being in alignment with who I am, and really coming on, being my highest best self. So I feel recalibrated. All right. How do you feel? All right, so who is this session for? This session is for you. If you're starting to feel obligated, right, or you feel obligated to show up even when you're empty, all right? If you carry the role as the strong one, the fixer, or the peacemaker, if you're never doing enough, even when you're doing too much, right? So there's this internal feeling that even in all the things you're doing, it's still not enough, right? Which is calling you to do more and more and more. And this is what we call, I'm going to introduce this word, insatiable, right? So it's this insatiable need for you to continue to do more, be more, be more, be more, but really never truly feel the fulfillment that you're looking for, right? So here's our powerful quote today. It's on the thumbnail. Listen, the guilt you feel isn't God, it's programming. All right. So let's talk about it. Internalized expectations don't show up as abuse, you guys. They show up as guilt. All right. And you tell yourself, I should be available. I should do more. I should hold it all together. But these shoulds, right, were formed in survival. All right. And they keep you accepted, not aligned. All right. So a lot of the things, and those who have taken the emotional intelligence course, right, that this is one of those paradigms, right? The duty paradigm. What should I do? What could I have done? Right? Really just living off of these out of these obligations. Why are we living out this obligation? To stay safe. right? That's the main goal, right? What should I do to really like get the approval and things like that? And it's other lenses that you can mature into if we allow ourselves to do so. Okay, so earlier in this week, we exposed the peacekeeper pattern, right? And today we'll go inside the voice that really makes this pattern normal, the inner critic, really the inner critic that is shaped by guilt. All right, so I'm gonna share something that a client said, right? So a client said, I don't know who, or I didn't know who I was without the title of the strong one, right? I thought laying it all down meant failure, or I thought laying it all down meant failure, but it was freedom, right? So when she stopped obeying guilt, she really started to live in grace, right? So whatever that title is that you gave yourself, the strong one, the go-to person, the auntie, the uncle, right? The one who made it, right? Whatever that is, you have identified with it, and you really training the brain on how to move, right? And we just want to retrain and unlearn that. And it's not that you can't serve and help, right? But we just want to be helping not from guilt, but or obligation, but out of our grace, right? Out of alignment. All right. So here's our mirror moment, heart check in. All right. So what's one should statement that you've been living by that no longer feels true? All right. What's one should you've been living by that no longer feels true? Now, let's slow down. Let's slow this down together. I want to walk through 5 truths that will help you really recognize what guilt has been doing to your internal story, all right? And then give you permission to really help let it go, all right? Not with shame, but through clarity. So, number 1, guilt often disguises itself as spiritual maturity. Listen, sometimes the reason you stay in that role as the strong one, as the helper, and as the peacekeeper is because guilt told you to, right? It isn't the godly thing to do. It's guilt is making you do this or really persuading you to do this, right? You were taught, don't rock the boat. Always say yes. Be selfless, even if it breaks you. But here's the truth. Maturity doesn't mean ignoring your limits, right? Understanding your capacity. God doesn't really call you into emotional slavery, right? If we align with the Messiah's coming, right, we know that there was someone already sacrificed for our glory, for our grace, for our deliverance. And truly, you really don't have to do and perform for God, right? God is not looking for performance. How do we know that? Because he loves you unconditionally. He says come as you are, right? So these performances that we're doing, and we're saying, I'm doing this so that God can love me, or I'm doing this, so that's performative, and that is not what God is calling you to do. God is really giving you this time to really understand who you are and whose you are, right? And so that you can really start to feel that unconditional love for yourself, right? And then give that to those around you. But when we're in performance mode, right, and we're thinking that we're performing for God, right, that in some way, and I say this, I had a client the other day, and she was like, yeah, I really think God blessed me, with this opportunity because I've been, really aligned and doing things that I should be doing. And I really think I got rewarded. And I'm listening to her, and I'm, good job, right? Like you are, definitely aligning and doing what you desire to do. Here is my offer, if I can offer it to you. And she was like, sure. And I was like, instead of thinking that God is blessing you with this thing, how about we change that to this is a consequence of your alignment, right? Because God created systems, right? And those systems automatically do a certain thing. So if I plant a seed and I water it, then that seed will grow, and we'll get tomatoes, right? We're not saying that God is blessing us with the tomato, because we know that it was a tomato seed, and I did what I was supposed to do with this tomato seed, and this is why I had the tomatoes. And the other part to that is that when we have this mentality that God blessed me for the good things I did, right? Then we also say, well, God punished me because I didn't do something, right? So we can't say that God blesses us without also feeling like God punished us. Now, let's go back to that tomato seed. You have a tomato seed and you don't water it. You just plant it, but you don't water it. You don't give it sunlight, and it doesn't bear, right, the tomato. Are you thinking that God in some way now didn't bless you because the seed, you planted the seed, but you didn't do what you were supposed to do. Is that God like not blessing you now? No, it's not. So this is the function, right? This is the process. When we do the things that we desire to do, we plant the seeds, and we go and we are obedient to the process, then we're going to yield a harvest, right? And that is by God's design, and those are the harvests that God wants for us. So this storehouse of blessing, we can say that God blessed the system, and when I tap into that system, now I'm in his blessing because he put certain patterns together, right? But to say that God blessed me, right, because I did something right, you're also opening yourself up to God didn't bless me because I did something wrong. And if you're saying that, then that means that we don't have an unconditional God, right? God accepts you in all your ways, and then you get the free will to either learn a process or a system or don't, right? But then you now are responsible for your life, and God has already put a system in place, right? That, hey, if you do A, B, C, D, then you will have this. Listen, God has already done what God is going to do. All right. And so you can't be living in God's blessing, meaning now you are obedient to the roles and the processes and the systems that he put in place. But this specific thing is not a quote unquote blessing from God. It's actually a harvest from something that you have cultivated, right? You planted a seed, you wanted this thing, and now you're experiencing your harvest. And she kind of breathed after that, and I was very grateful because I do think that we do have this type of thing that God is blessing me or God is punishing me, and that is being creating that need for us to perform. And so again, I just want to say that guilt often disguises itself as spiritual maturity, but here's the truth. Maturity doesn't mean ignoring your limitations. God didn't call you into emotional slavery. What you may think as obedience might actually be over functioning dressed in spirituality, because God doesn't need you to disappear to be divine. He needs you to be honest and whole. That is the whole thing, right? That's a big part of the process. The more honest you are, right, and really taking away the right and wrong. Is this the right thing to do? Is this the wrong thing to do? It may not be the right thing to do, but it might be the thing you need to do. Okay, right? It may be the truth that you need to bear at this point, right, to really grow and mature into your next step. So God doesn't need you to disappear to be divine. He needs you to be honest, to be whole. All right. Number two, should is usually a shame script in disguise. Remember, I talk about should being one of those paradigms. So the inner voice saying you should do more, or you should have done more, you should have been strong, you should have been able to handle it. That's not accountability, you guys. That's shame playing guilt's biggest hit. So should is rarely connected to who you are. It's tied to who you think you have to be accepted. All right. So the next time you hear should, just ask yourself, am I aligning with my truth or performing from my trauma? All right. Number three, internalized roles really keep you stuck in outdated stories. So the identity that you've been living, the dependable one, the strong one, and the one who holds it all together, guess what? That's not your identity. That's your emotional assignment from survival. That was an assignment that you were given when you were in survival mode. All right. You picked up the role because you had to, but now it's running your life on autopilot. So again, you're in a season that role may not be serving you, and it's okay to prune that, right? To in some way, stop feeding that part of you so that it can wither away. All right. You have permission to really retire the role and really rewrite your narrative. You're allowed to become who you are now, not who you had to be then. And again, a lot of us are just on a hamster wheel, different people, different characters, different teammates, different co-workers, but you're still running by the old script, and you're wondering, why am I still attracting this type of life? And it's because you're running on the same script. So the characters in your life, their faces just changed, their names just changed, right? But you are still the same, and that's why you keep repeating the same thing. All right, listen, you don't have to hold it together. You don't have to hold together what God never called you to carry. So listen to me very gently when I say this. If you're holding emotional weight for people, If you're holding emotional weight for systems or situations that's keeping you stuck, that's not obedience. That is what we call a burden. All right. God never asked you to be the container for everyone else's comfort. As a matter of fact, right? He gave them their own life. He gave them their own container. Okay. He asked you, though, to walk in truth, to trust, right? And peace that includes you, right? So he asked you to walk in truth, walk in trust, and walk in the peace that includes you. So just because it's heavy doesn't mean it's holy, you guys. And sometimes you're carrying what God never really asked, or sometimes you're carrying what God already gave you permission to lay down, right? That whispering you, that nudging you, like this is not for me anymore, right? Your divine self is speaking to you saying, hey, like this is not it, right? But you're keep holding on to it. Why? Because the nervous system wants to hold on to it, because that is what's familiar, but that's also what's draining you and what's keeping you down. All right. And last but not least, conviction pulls you forward, guilt holds you hostage. All right. So let's say a lot of times we say that I'm convicted to do this thing, and we really need to ask, am I being convicted, or is this guilt driven? And it's okay to pause, right? We don't have to be urgent, right? We can pause and say, let me get back to you, and do some inner work, right? Some really questioning, like, is this conviction, right? Is God convicting me to do this? Right? Or is this from guilt? So let's make the difference plain. Conviction says, you're better than this. Let's grow. All right. Guilt says, you will never be enough. Try harder. Right. So guilt is more, like it's more shame drawn, right? It's trying to pull you in. It's like luring you in, but it doesn't feel in alignment. Where conviction is like, one, conviction is based on your values. All right. So a big part of you understanding conviction is you understanding what you value, right? So if you don't understand your values, meaning who you want to be, how you want to show up, right? Um, if you don't understand your expectations, right? Your boundaries and things like that, then conviction can be anything, right? But we're going to be convicted on the things that we value. We're going to be convicted on the things that we have standard and expectations for, right? Guilt is from programming, right? So maybe I value autonomy now, right? So my highest value is autonomy, meaning me having the freedom to be me. All right. Now, so I'm going to be convicted for my autonomy. All right. Guilt, though, say I didn't always have autonomy, right? That I was more of the tribe, whatever the tribe says, right? Whatever they say, I'm gonna go with that. So guilt is gonna pull me towards more of this tribal thinking, right? Like, oh, so who's gonna do it for them now? If you don't do it, how they're gonna make it, right? Right. But if I know that my value is autonomy, and me being me, right? And I know that thing that I'm being requested to do is not in alignment with that value, then I can discern, right? Is this conviction or is this guilt? And mind you, both of them are happening, right? So it's not that you're going to come to this spiritual awakening and guilt is not going to pull for you. Guilt is an emotion. It's always going to be there, and it's always going to pull. And conviction is going to be there and always going to pull. And then you have to discern, is this conviction or is this guilt? Okay. Because one comes from God and the other comes from fear of losing love, fear of losing safety, and fear of approval. All right. Or rejection. All right. So conviction calls you into expansion, and guilt really change you to perfection. So when you move from conviction, you feel more clearer, right? It's kind of like you have this peace. And remember, I'm trying to introduce this concept that peace is not, it's not this like everything is perfect. Peace is, even in this imperfection, I'm okay, right? Even in this storm, even in their upsetness, I'm okay. Even in my unraveling, I find the eye of this storm, right? So peace is not this calm, everything is calm and everything is going. It's the peace I'm bringing is this okayness, all right? That I'm protected, God is with me, and everything is working for my good, all right? All right. So again, conviction calls you to expansion. Guilt really changes you to perfection. And when you move from conviction, you feel clearer. And when you move from guilt, you feel smaller. And you don't need to feel smaller you don't need to feel small to feel loved. All right. You already You already are. You already love. You already are enough. All right. So here's the real question I want you to sit with. All right. And sit in. What voice am I following? Conviction that calls me forward or guilt that's holding me back? Because today, right, I believe God's giving you permission to really let go of the guilt-based script so that you can really step into an identity rooted in peace. All right. So listen, the inner pressure isn't always wisdom, you guys. It's often programming because obeying internalized expectations really disconnects you from your divine alignment. Your next level isn't about performing better, it's about releasing who you never had to be. All right. So here's a testimony. I stopped measuring my worth by how strong I appeared and really start honoring how I felt, right? When I start honoring how I felt, right, it was a learning curve, right? And then even sometimes, like, am I feeling this way out of pattern, or do I really need rest, right? Right. So I'm really trying to get to know myself because here's the thing: studies have linked chronic guilt and role-based identities with burnout, perfectionism, and suppressed emotions. Listen, you don't owe guilt another performance. You owe yourself what your permission. All right. So you don't owe guilt another performance. You owe yourself permission. And that's what you really want, isn't it? Right. That's what you really want. All right. So if that made sense, put a heart in the chat for me. Put a comment. I hear you, girl. Okay. All right. So the stopping out framework, we know that today we're talking about identity in the inner talk, right? So this inner critic, this inner speaking. So here's what I want to do today. I want to walk you through 10 truths that will help you to really break up with the roles that you never meant to perform. So I want to walk you through 10 truths that will help you break up with the roles that you were never meant to perform or that are outdated, all right? And really come back to the truth of who you actually are. So these aren't just ideas, you guys. They're invitations and they're mirrors. So let's go truth by truth. Number one, should is a trauma echo, not a truth. Anytime we're using should, I still use should, right? And I have to catch myself, right? So should, again, it's that paradigm. It's more of a duty paradigm. And if you want to know more about paradigms, please do the emotional intelligence course for yourself and your own edification. All right. So listen, should isn't a trauma echo, not the truth. The voice in your head that's saying you should do more, you should be nicer, you should stay quiet, right? This is not wisdom. That's old fear playing dress up. Okay. Should often comes from what hurt us, not from what healed us. It's the emotional residue of survival and not alignment. Again, it's that duty paradigm. So the next time you hear should, I want you to pause and really ask yourself, is this coming from guilt or is this coming from God? All right. Number two, the second truth, guilt-based identity creates shame-driven habits. So when your identity is really built on guilt, guess what? Um, when your identity is built on guilt, on being the helper, on being a strong one, on being the fixer, you start moving from shame, right? You hustle harder, you apologize for resting, and you avoid boundaries, not because it's true to who you are, but because you're afraid of what might happen or what happens if you're not who they expect you to be. All right. But guess what? You don't have to prove that you're good. You already are. All right. So just sit with that. All right. You don't have to prove that you're good. You already are. I love this. This is how I know that you already are good because God created you. You're beautifully and wonderfully made. All right. But this is how I know that we make mistakes. And yeah, because we're learning and we're growing, right? And so as we're unlearning some things, the whole process of learning is trial and error, right? It's trial and error. So you only know what you know until you know something different. So you're really going into these spaces, these new spaces of healing and expansion, and you're learning more about yourself, right? And so you're not always going to get it right. All right. So it's either a lesson or a blessing. All right. So you don't have to prove you're good. You already are. Truth number three, you learn roles before you learn boundaries. This is phenomenal, right? So a lot of us have learned roles before we learn boundaries. So most of us were handed roles before we even could choose, right? Or even had the chance to ask what we needed. All right. So you became the peacemaker, the overachiever, the dependable one, and you didn't learn where you ended you didn't learn where you ended or someone else began. That's why setting boundaries feels scary, all right? Because you will learn the role before you will learn the boundary. So it disrupts the role that feels familiar, but false, all right? So that's why setting boundaries feels scary, because when you set boundaries, it actually disrupts the role that's familiar and false to you, all right? So it's okay to say that this role helped me survive, but it's not who I am now. All right. So I think that I want you to whisper this to yourself, that you learn roles before you learn boundaries. And that's why sometimes the role can oversede or supersede like this need, right, to do the role, because you've been in this role for so long and now you're setting boundaries and expectations, and on the inside there could be some conflict. All right. But that role helped you to survive, but that's not who you are. All right. Number four, for the fourth truth, emotional responsibility is not your calling. Just because you can hold it, it doesn't mean you should. All right. You are not the manager of everyone's emotions. You are not the regulator of every room's energy, and you are not, or that is not your assignment. Your calling is not emotional contaminant, right? Your calling is not emotional contaminant. Your calling is emotional clarity. All right. Truth number five, surviving roles or the survivor role doesn't serve your becoming. Roles like the strong one, the one who never needs help, the fixer, those are survival codes, right? So you've been coded in this or programmed. Because remember, I say you're not broken, you're just programmed, all right? So you picked up when you needed them, right? So these roles actually came in because the family dynamic needed it, all right? But now they're keeping you from becoming who you were actually meant to be as an adult. And that's the thing. So we talk about like transformations, like the caterpillar to the butterfly, right? And the butterfly looks nothing like the caterpillar, right? We talk about these morphing into different things, and this happens to us. So maybe you were in a caterpillar state as a youth, right? And that was your state. And then you had to cocoon yourself, and now you're a butterfly. It's okay to be different. All right. We talk about, now I've introduced the concept of the seed doesn't look like the apple, right? So, when you were younger, you were the seed. Now it's time to birth the apple. And there's so many stages that you got to go through that looks nothing like the apple. All right. To even get the apple. All right. So a lot of us, we're stuck in a role because that's all our mind knows, and that's keeping you the same. If you're stuck in roots, or you're stuck at the trunk, or you're stuck in the branches, right, in the branches stage of your life, you're never truly harvesting the apple. All right, and we want to get to that apple. All right, so again, roles like the strong one, the one who never needs help, the fixer, their survival codes, and you pick them up when you needed them. But now they're keeping you from becoming who you're actually meant to be. You don't owe your future. You don't owe your future to who you had to be in your past. Permission granted. All right. Permission granted. You get to outgrow those old survival stories. Truth number six, you can be strong and soft. All right. You don't have to pick. You can cry and still be called. You can pause and still be powerful. Let go of the belief that being soft makes you weak. Your softness is a part of your strength, and it makes you human. So wholeness, when you stop performing either or, will help you start to live in both. All right. In the end, right? I told you I met a coach, my feminine coach. Shout out to Coach Lou, right? She's like, Sheila, you have to learn how to live in the end. It's not either or, right? You can be soft and you can be a boss. All right. You can be sad and you can be grateful. All right. You can be these things, right? Because there's so many intersections that we live in. All right. Truth number seven, you're allowed to rest without explanation. So let me say that again. You don't have to earn rest. You don't need to justify it with how much you've done. You don't need to apologize for not being available. Rest is not a reward. It is your birthright. How do we know that? Because when you rest, your body restores. All right. So it's a part of the system that God put in place. Animals do it. They hibernate, right? They sleep. We have nocturnal animals that only come up at night, right? So rest is a part of our dynamic as humans. All right. So rest is not a reward, right? It's your right. And it's something that helps you to live in your fulfilled self. All right. Your body deserves peace even when you don't. Your body deserves peace even when you haven't proven anything. All right. Truth number 8: guilt often intimidates obedience. So this one's a little tricky because sometimes we confuse guilt for the Holy Spirit. But here's the difference: guilt shrinks you, conviction calls you up. Guilt says you're bad. God says you're better than this. All right. So if you're hearing leads to shame, not grace, it's not obedience, you guys, it's emotional programming. So learn to tell the difference between God's whisper and guilt's trap. Okay. That's your job. Just learn the difference because both of them are happening, right? And we're not going to get so holy that we only going to hear God's whisper because the nervous system is what it is. Guilt is going to try to pull at you. All right. Number 9, your worth is not your role. All right. You are not good because you're the helper. You are not worthy because you're the dependable one. You are not enough because of the things that you've done. You're enough because you exist. All right. You're worthy because you were made on purpose. All right. Roles may get you applause, but identity is what gives you your peace. So you are not the job. You are not the job you do to someone else's life or for someone else's life. All right. And then last but not least, you can retire. Right. You can retire from who you had to be. All right. You don't have to carry the same expectations you inherited. You can hand your resignation from being the strong one. You can hand in your resignation from being an overfunctioner, and you can hand in your resignation for being a peacemaker. You're not quitting. You're just choosing you. And that choice is sacred. So let's take a deep breath, right? It's time. It's okay. Let's take a deep breath. It's okay if your identity has been shaped by roles, by guilt, and by survival. But today, all right, you have permission to choose something different. You're not obligated to perform from worth. You are allowed to simply be and call that holy. All right. All right. So drop a holy in the chat if you agree with those 10 truths. All right. And then ask me some questions if you have any questions about that as we move on to the biblical wisdom. Listen, the voice in your head that says should, rewiring your internal expectations. That is what we're talking about today. So here's how I want to, or here's the verses that I want to introduce to you today. All right. So Romans 12:2, do not conform to the patterns of the world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. If you don't know already, I'm going to keep using this verse because I think it's one of those go-to principles that I feel like when we can say this, then we can give ourselves permission. Listen, this verse is saying you don't have to keep living inside roles that were shaped by guilt, that was shaped by survival or by societal pressures. You are not required to conform to the emotional patterns of overfunctioning, perfectionism, or self-erosion. You're invited to into something better, which is renewal. But here's the part that we often miss. Renewing your mind isn't just about what you know. All right. It's about you interrupting the cycle of guilt-based identity and start really thinking from truth, not from trauma. So if your inner voice says you should be available, you shouldn't rest right now, you should fix everything, God is whispering, listen, that's not me. That's the world's pattern. That is what you are programmed to do. I'm doing something new in you. I'm doing something new in how you think. I'm doing something new in how you speak. And I'm doing something new in how you see yourself. All right. So here's the neuroscience to really help support this and really support this whole lesson for today. Listen, your brain is wired for efficiency, not for truth. Okay. Let me say that to the people in the back of the room. And so I'm going to say it again. Your brain is wired for efficiency, not for truth. That doesn't make you the devil. All right. And that doesn't make this human vessel something bad. All right. This thing of being a human, something bad. All right. It's just the brain is not wired for that, right? It's wired for efficiency. So that means that your brain repeats what's familiar, even if it's harmful. And this is where we need to separate the judging of who we are and really appreciating the system in this body and these cells that were given to us, right? Divinely. All right. Because I think that we want our brain, or we disconnect from our bodies because we feel like our flesh is like this bad thing or whatever. And it's just based on efficiency. What you put in, you're going to get out. All right. So your brain is wired for efficiency. That doesn't mean that just means that the brain repeats what's familiar, even when it's harmful. So if you grew up being the strong one, being the helpful one, being the fixer, your brain stored the role as safe and necessary. All right. Even now, even now, those roles feel real because you're neurologically, right, ingrained this type of pattern in your mind. All right. But thanks to neuroplasticity, right, the brain's ability to rewire itself, you can interpret or interrupt these patterns. All right. So when you speak new languages rooted in this new identity, when you refuse old roles, and when you pause and choose truth over guilt, guess what? You're literally rewiring the mind, just like the verse says. All right. So the guiding you is whispers. You don't have to keep proving your worth through your roles I never assigned. You're meant to conform. You're not meant to conform. You're meant to transform. So again, do not. So again, the verse in itself is saying, do not conform to the patterns of the world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Because as you renew your mind, then through this neuroplasticity, then you're going to train your life to be a certain way. Once you train it, then you can start yielding the blessings, right? Because now you're in the process of God, right? And now you're experiencing the harvests and things like that. All right. So our promise verse, right? 43 and Isaiah 43 and 19. See, I've done a new thing. Now it has sprung up. Do you not perceive it? Again, the interpretation of this is God is not waiting for you to perform the old version. God is not waiting for you to perform the old version of you better. You guys, he already started a new thing in you. All right, new cells, new hair follicles, new synapses, new neurons to connect together, right? But here's the key. Here's the key in this verse. Perceive. All right. Can you see the new thing? All right. Can you see the new thing? Can you recognize that you are allowed to move differently now? Because if you're still rehearsing guilt, all right, if you're still obeying the voice that says should, you might miss the new thing, or you might miss the new thing God is doing through you and in you. He's not requiring performance, but he is requiring your presence. And when you understand that presence, then you can recognize this new thing, and then you can start moving towards that. All right. How does neuroplasticity really support this? This verse is backed by how perception really shapes our identity. So you know that there's something called the reticular activation system in your brain. It's where your brain filters what you see based on what you believe is important, right? And relevant. So again, the reticular activation system is your brain's filter for what you see based on what it believes is important and relatable. So if your mind is still trained to scan for guilt, for people pleasing, right, and for approval, you literally won't perceive the new identity that God is building, because your brain is filtering for the old. All right. But when you begin to really interrupt guilt and start to choose truth, right, your perception starts to shift. So you start to notice new patterns, new peace, new language, new opportunities, new growth, new potential, right? And ultimately, what? A new life. And that shift, all right, that's God and neuroplasticity working hand to hand. So again, reticular activation system, you just bought that car. All right. You never really saw this car before. Now you see this car everywhere. That is the reticular activation system at work. Okay. Like it is, you tell your brain what's important, or the nervous system is telling your brain what's important. And that's what it sees. And that's why I say, even when we start talking about living in multidimensional universes and all of that, that is just the reticular activation system. Listen, everything that your life, the life you want right now, is right in front of you. It's just that your nervous system is trained to see what you were programmed to see. So the blessings are there, but you don't see the blessings because you've been programmed to see what? The things that's getting in the way. The resource or the opportunity is there, but you don't see that because your nervous system was trained to see the times that it didn't work, right? And so we have to consciously keep moving our nervous system back to the thing you want. And that's why it's so important to know what you want, right? Make that important. So then the reticular activation system can start noticing, right, what is good happening, right? And this, how do we train that? Through gratitude, right? I'm grateful today. Really scanning my day. What happened today that I'm grateful for? Oh, you know what? I was able to get that coffee, right? I had enough money in my account to have a coffee or to buy the coffee. I got to hug my son today, right? So now you're training the brain through gratitude, right? On the things that you're grateful for. And after a while, the reticular activation system will say, oh, she wants to see the things she's grateful for. Let's show that to them more, right? She or he wants to see the things that they're grateful for. Let me do that for them more. This is why the mind is so beautiful, right? It's just been trained in a way that is giving you the reasons not to distrust, but you can train it to show you the reasons to trust too. All right. All right. So again, you won't perceive the new identity that God is putting in front of you or that God is building, because the brain is naturally filtering out the old. All right. All right. So I want you to know that the God in you whispers, you don't have to rehearse the old to be worthy of the new. I already started that work in you. Now let's rewire how you see it. All right. And this is important. Again, the verse says, see, I have done a new thing. Now it has sprung up. Now it's sprung up. Do you not perceive it? Are you looking for the new thing? Are you looking for the new thing? So again, this is my question for you as we wrap up the biblical wisdom. What old role have I outdated, right, or outgrown? What old role have I outgrown? But guilt keeps trying to pull me back in. And then I want you to know that Romans 12:2 and Isaiah 49 and 43 and 19. So Romans 12:2 and Isaiah 43 and 19 aren't about transformation. They're invitations to really perceive, pause, and reprogram. God is not far away asking you to hustle into identity. If this divinity is inside of you, guiding you out of the guilt loop and into your normalized self. All right. Into your normalized self. All right. So remember, we first we build our habits, then our habits make us. All right. And we can train ourselves to see something different. All right. So how do we put this into action? So here's your action steps. I want you to identify one should statement running your life. I want you to replace it with an identity rooted truth. And then I want you to say it out loud every time the old narrative shows up. Your journal prompt for today. What part of my identity was built on guilt rather than alignment? And then your affirmation for today. Listen, that guilt isn't God, it's programming, and I'm allowed to rewrite that script. And then our intention, right? I show up aligned, not obligated. And then your bonus challenge. Speak one boundary today that really challenges your internal should. All right. You know, I'm going to do that, call that challenge and that charge. So I'm calling them, asking, what role are you ready to retire from? Your challenge today. Let your yes be aligned. Let your no be holy. And then your charge. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to explain peace. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to explain peace. You just have to walk in it. So go shape your life. All right. So go shape your life. Listen, if this session resonated with you and you are walking away with some insight today, you already know what to do. Drop a fire in the chat today. I want you to know that you are not your programming. You are not your performance. You are already enough. All right. You are already enough. And if you want to start working on that, you already know the doors are open to Project Life. So you can join that project at SheilaLittle.com/life. Make sure you go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you join the community in my Facebook community at Elevate in Life with Sheila Little. All right. And then our takeaway for today is you don't owe guilt another performance. You owe yourself, okay, the permission. All right. So next week, we're going to go into surrendering to perfection. I'm going to switch it up a little bit. Instead of doing the stop it, I'm going to try to do the life acronym, right? So we'll talk about surrender to perfection when it comes to our love of self, surrender into perfection when it comes to our interactions with others, surrender into perfection when it comes to our focus, and then surrender into perfection when it comes to our energy. This is Project Life, and I'm really thinking that I really need to start putting more of the life in front of you so that you can be able to utilize the resources more in your love of self, your interactions with others, your focus, and your energy. All right. I want you to know that and then get feedback because of that as we move through that new way of being with these life lessons. All right. And it's called life lessons. So why not introduce the love of self, the interactions with others, our focus, and our emotions? Listen, I love you. I love you. I love you. And I will see you next week for those life lessons. Till later.